This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 359, Contribution Events. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're talking about contribution events with Kristen Pohl and Surabhi Gokti. Kristen is a Drupal veteran with 18 years under her belt. She's worn all of the hats over the years, from freelancer to agency owner to startup founder and more. Currently, Kristen is working with a couple Australian companies on Drupal and static web technologies. She also spends a lot of time contributing in the Drupal community, focused on several initiatives, including Bug Smash, Drupal 10 readiness, and what we're talking about today, contribution events. Surabhi has been part of the Drupal community since 2016 as a non-code contributor. Yes. Since then, she has participated in a lot of Drupal events in India, as well as European events like DrupalCon Europe and Drupal Dev Days. Recently, she's also taken part in American events like Drupal Decoupled Days, I'm sorry. Oof. Drupal Camp Asheville. And she also enjoys her time contributing the most. Kristen and Surabhi, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm John Picozzi, Solutions Architect at EPAM, and today my co-hosts are Nick Laughlin, founder of Enlightened Development. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning. Always excited to talk about contribution in the Drupal community as well as other communities.
And joining us for his last time, Ryan Price, Solutions Architect at FFW. How are you doing, sir?
It's doing great today. The heat bubble has ended in Oregon, or it's on its way out. So we're doing very well today. In fact,
it's apparently moving towards the East Coast because we're getting that in a couple of days. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to thank Ryan for joining us for the last 4 episodes. It's been super fun, and feel free to come back anytime.
Yeah, it's super great. And apparently, all you have to do to get on is just ambush John at DrupalCon.
That's going to make DrupalCon very interesting next year. Let's move on to our module of the week. So I think Nick dropped this one in here, and it's actually not one that I've used before. So Nick, tell us a little bit about anonymous login.
Yeah, anonymous login is a very simple module. I don't know that it quite describes what it does with the name, but you can configure your site with this module to direct anonymous users to a particular page. So for example, if you want to force anonymous users to go to the login page, you can do that. So I use this on a site that is kind of a learning system site, and we need to track everything that the users are doing in the site because it's part of a study. And so we need to just make sure that everybody logs in immediately, and this module just makes it, very simple. You install the module, and you can configure a couple of things. So you can allow them to reset their passwords, you can allow them to register, and you can allow them to log in.
Sorry, doesn't Drupal already do that out of the box? If you go to an admin page, it doesn't redirect you to login, or it just gives you access denied, right?
Gives you 403. Okay. And there's 403. I think there's a 403 login module too. And I forget why that didn't quite work on this particular case, but it didn't.
This one basically takes you to the login page with the destination, so it kind of completes that loop for you if you need it to, right?
I think so, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, so if somebody got logged out, it forces it. I think that's the other thing too, is that it more cleanly handles auto logout. So this client also needs to, because it's dealing with, potential HIPAA information, it needs to log people out after a certain amount of time. And in combination with this module, it kind of forces them to end up back at the login screen rather than some other screen.
I feel like this module needs a better name. I'm not going to lie. Right? Like, I looked at it as anonymous login, and I immediately thought it allowed people to log into your site anonymously, like without without needing an actual login. Like, how some services out there, you can type your name in and then they'll treat you as a logged in user.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. But that's true of a lot of Drupal modules. All right. Any other thoughts about anonymous login before we move on?
Yeah, one of the other times I've used something like this, again, I hadn't used this particular module, but it was, like an internal website. But I can remember like feeling weird when I uncheck the like anonymous user allowed to view content. Like it feels like this is like the main purpose of Drupal, and there's that one permission, and that one little checkbox can like break everything. So permissions, pay attention.
Yeah, permissions are hard. It's like, I tell my kids sometime, like any job worth doing is worth doing right? Like permissions is that thing. Like you really got to focus on it and make sure you're doing it right. All right, let's jump into our primary topic for today, which is contribution events. And, Sarabi, we're going to start with a real easy question. What are contribution events?
I think contribution events, the name itself suggests that it is oriented towards contribution. So if you look at the recent event that we did, the Drupal 10 porting day is one of the examples of contribution events. And it is something that both code and non-code contributors can take part in equally. And I can also say that it is justified, that you are doing some kind of non-code contribution as well here.
Yeah, because I imagine like contribution events need a lot of help with, documentation, updating,
Absolutely.
and testing, and a lot of things that aren't necessarily like writing PHP or JavaScript or something, right?
And the very first thing where you start the planning phase is non-code. So
yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest gaps I think in the Drupal community right now, as far as contribution goes, is that project management side. There are a lot of projects on Drupal. There are a lot of issues. And I mean, even if we're talking about the project browser a couple episodes ago, and one of the tasks is, creating logos for the top 100 modules in use on the site. And again, that's a valuable contribution. It makes, it really polishes the Drupal project. It makes it look a lot more professional. And it's not something that you have to know any code whatsoever to do to design a logo.
Shameless plug. I'll drop the slides, a link to the slides to my DrupalCon talk in the show notes, because that was all about non-code contribution.
Yep. And I think I'm also there in that slide, one of the slides.
It's true. I included people from the community, and Sarabi is on there. Absolutely.
So Kristen, can you tell me a little bit about the contribution initiative itself? When did it get started? How are you involved? And what's its purpose?
Yeah. So we started a few months ago. I want to say May. It feels much longer at this point, but it came out of the fact that I've been in the community for forever, and during the pandemic, I've actually been able to do a lot more contribution. It's been, I guess, a silver lining for me than previously, even though I've still done a lot. But I found myself, I kept asking, at the mentoring meetings or Drupal 10 readiness or Bug Smash, hey, so when are there some contribution events coming up? And people are like, well, I don't know, maybe, I guess DrupalCon, or, like all the sort of typical things, but there wasn't really like a pulse on like, when are these events, and who's doing them, and are they remote or in person, or any of that kind of stuff. And as I became a broken record and I kept sort of asking this stuff, I was like, why isn't this a little more organized? Like, we have mentoring, which is great, and that helps add events. And I didn't know too much about the event, listing page, which was fairly new. But it didn't feel like anyone was kind of in charge. So I sort of threw it out as an idea in one of I think it was the Drupal 10 readiness meetings. I said, so if I wanted to just like kind of get a hold of this whole thing and this space and try to figure it out, what do you guys think? And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And I wasn't sure exactly where it was going to go at first, but I said, okay. I just dove in, and I made a project page, and I made a documentation page, and I started trying to find people who could be co-maintainers, all that kind of stuff, and just try to grab people and figure out what this thing is. And part of the first steps were like, what are we doing? What is the point of this thing? And it started with falling into several categories, which was documentation, like how do you make a contribution event, promotion, like how do you promote these things, and it actually ended up expanding. We started talking about funding. How do you fund contribution events or contribution in general? And then also the open social platform, which was used at several contribution events. That became a thing of like, what is this thing? Do we want to use it? Don't we want to use it? Should we use it going forward? So there were a number of topics that kind of fell out of this sort of initial discovery period. And yeah, we've evolved to actually running our first event just last week.
Yeah, very cool. So what are some of the top things, if you're giving someone the elevator pitch, like what are 3 things this group is trying to, achieve? Or it doesn't have to be 3.
So I think documentation is a huge thing because there is bits and pieces around, but it's really hard to find. We've been asking and trying to find people that have more information on like, okay, well, how would you run like a remote contribution event? And, Gabor had run the Drupal 9 porting events in 2020. There were a couple of them. He was the main person running them, and a lot of us helped out. And I was like, well, what did you do? It's like, it was all kind of ad hoc and not really document, well, I did this and I did that and whatever. And so there was sort of, there's this sort of knowledge that's sort of, I don't know, not very pinned down, that everybody has a bit of, this and that. And I think it's that project, going back to that project management piece of really trying to, well, what are all the steps? Can we actually document all of the steps? Like if you want to run a contribution event, here's your, playbook. There you go. I mean, you might have some variations, but here's a starting point and you can just do this. So definitely documentation on how to run them. And then, like I mentioned before, like the marketing. And I think a big one is actually going to be the funding thing, which we've started doing some investigation there. That is a whole, and I think you had Tim on for that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, that's a whole thing, but we've actually made some progress in that discovery. And I think we have a direction we want to go there.
So can you tell me a little bit more about how you went about starting this kind of community-based initiative? So you mentioned that you kind of brought it up a few times during the Drupal 10 or Buck Smash initiative until you finally realized, hey, maybe there's something here. But what were the next steps? Was it just creating the project page and like saying, hey, I'm interested in this? Or who did you talk to, and how did you guys get involved?
Right. I guess fortunately I've been around for a long time. And so I've seen a lot of things, and I've had modules on Drupal.org. I know how project pages works. I know how project pages or projects work on Drupal.org for non-code projects. Like the San Francisco Drupal user group has a project page in order to track, their, all their events and giving credit to people. So, I mean, I had a lot of that knowledge behind me that I kind of, again, there was no playbook for me to go in, okay, you want to make you might want to make some initiative. What do you do? Right. And I was just going off of the knowledge I had. So I knew, okay, I want to be able to credit people. So I'm going to make a project and be able to do that and do the project management aspect. Right. So I knew that. And I thought, well, we're going to have some documentation, and, there's different guides and things like that. So I guess I'll make, I'm like, I don't know, does it make sense to make a guide? Sure. Okay. That's a little bit interesting. So, so I made, a guide area. And then the next step was, I can't do this all alone. And I don't remember who pointed that out. It might've been, yeah, I'm not sure. There was someone who was like, well, you can't be the only person maintaining this, because, if other people want to give credit and stuff. And that was the whole point. So I was like, oh yeah, I need co-maintainers on this project so that, they can move things along. So I did kind of an outreach and promotion and managed to get a number of people on board for that. But then the next step was project management. I just started making all sorts of issues like, okay, we need to know our goals. We need to set up a regular meeting. Actually, that was, I think, Saraba, you were the one that said to do the regular meetings. So yeah, that was, because I was like, more meetings. Do we really want more meetings? So it was just making all sorts of issues just to get organized, and just a lot of project management, and just, yeah, kind of evolved from there.
That's awesome. And, it's pretty inspirational, right? To say like, hey, you saw a need, right? And you wanted to do something about it. You were able to jump in and get that off the ground and running, not just walking, but running, which is awesome. So I'm wondering, and I'm going to ask both of you this question, but I'm going to start with Sarabi. Like, why did each of you feel that this was important? Like, what's the driving factor here?
So before getting involved in this, I kind of had a problem in my mind that we initially, when the COVID had happened, we had started within the Indian community, we started with having regular contribution sprints. And it was going very well in the initial phase, but after a couple of months, it started to fade a bit, maybe because of online fatigue. So it was the problem that I was not finding the solution to. And for a year, I was not able to, actually. And after that, when I read Kristen's message, I think on D10 readiness itself, and immediately I started mapping the problem to this, that this can be a platform, and this is where even I can understand what other peoples in the local communities are doing, if they are doing any kind of events like this, or if I may give this idea that these are the things that we can do regularly. So these all things kind of started mapping in my head, and I immediately pinged Kristen.
So before we turn to you, Kristen, actually, I'd like you to expand on something, Sarabi. You mentioned that you were having those kind of consistent contribution events in the Indian community. Were those community organized or industry organized?
It was
or a mix of both?
Organized by Drupal India Association.
Okay.
So it's a non-profit organization, and I was the one behind it who was organizing mainly. But yeah, it was not by industries. It was by DIA.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, Kristen, let's turn the question to you. Like, why did you feel like this was important, and what was your driver to kind of get this thing off the ground and running?
Yeah. So this pandemic has been interesting. I still can't really go to in-person events. So some of it's felt selfish, right? Like, I want more online events because, we're being quite careful due to possible long COVID risks and having immunocompromised family members and things like that. So a little bit maybe of FOMO, everyone started going to in-person events and being able to do stuff. And I'm like, well, darn, like, where are the online events, and what's going on, and how can I participate? So I think a little bit was just selfish reasons to be able to, be with the community. But also I think just it's sort of a, what do they call it? A multiplier. If I can organize something that someone can run with and go at, one person can do this event, it has that kind of multiplying effect, right? So we're building something that we're hoping other people, that we're not just the ones using this, the documentation and playbooks and, promotion techniques and all that stuff, right? We're hoping that we can put in kind of this blueprint that other people can run with and, have that kind of multiplying factor.
Yeah, I mean, it's the franchise model, right? McDonald's doesn't sell burgers. McDonald's sells a process to make burgers, right? And to make them consistently and as quickly and cheaply as possible, right? That's what you're doing here. You're not well, I mean, it sounds like you are organizing events too, but you're building the process for how to you're building the blueprint for how to put these kind of events together.
Yeah, the analogy that comes to my mind is like if you want to go to music school, right? You don't really enter music school to like become a better musician. You go to learn how to teach yourself the next thing, you know, and how to like work with other people and like how to participate in the community of music. But the actual act of playing is something you can only develop on your own and through actually doing it. So the school part is really more about like the practice around it. Like how do you rehearse? How do you create new things? How do you collaborate with people?
Yeah, it's a playbook basically to say like here's the instruction manual, like take it and do your thing, right? And Kristen, you said a couple of times, it was kind of selfish, right? Where you were like, you saw a need, right? I don't know if that's, I don't attribute that to being selfish. I just attribute it to seeing a need and then kind of like rising to the occasion, right? Because, obviously contribution events are important, right? Contributing to open source is important, whether it's in Drupal or, other communities. So I think that like building out kind of an instruction manual or a playbook on how to do that successfully is great, and definitely something where like it it's not just, hey, this is a contrib event, like whether it's internal to a company, external to a company, but like camps can use this, larger events can use this, and everybody can kind of like push this forward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, Kristen, you kind of mentioned a bit how you got involved already as kind of the generator of this initiative. So, Sarabi, I'd be curious to know from your perspective how you actually got involved in it. And then maybe, Kristen, you can talk a little bit about what it was like onboarding some of the first people onto the initiative. And like when somebody wants to get involved, what do you share? So, Sarabi, how did you decide to actually get into the weeds in this project and start contributing to it yourself?
So I think there are two things to this. First, as I already mentioned, that I kind of started mapping the problem and immediately pinged Kristen. And secondly, whenever I see any kind of non-code contribution opportunity, I quickly grab it. So that's what happened here. And I think that was the phase when we were just creating the Slack channel and Kristen was just reaching out to people for co-maintaining as well as understanding what can be done further. It was the time when we were still deciding if meetings are supposed to happen or not. So I was able to, get involved in a way that I can organize this, and my organizing skills are coming online. So that's how I started getting involved, talking more about how can we conduct meetings, what are the best ways, and things like that.
Okay. And so, Kristen, once you started reaching out to people to see if they wanted to participate too, what was that onboarding process like?
Yeah, a little ad hoc, kind of figuring it out as we go along here. But I was so thankful that Sarabi wanted to be involved because I had seen how much she had done in like the India Drupal community, and she's been on all sorts of DrupalCon events and organizing and like Asheville, all these places, right? So I knew, yes, that would be amazing to have that kind of support. And then, like I said, I got a bunch of maintainers added to both the documentation guide and to the project itself. They're there structurally, but there hasn't been that much involvement yet for them. A lot of these people actually already they're maintaining a million things and whatever. So I think that sort of a lot of that might be just backup support. But we've been having a lot of participation in the meetings. Like I said, Sarabi was like, oh yeah, well, we should have meetings. We decided to do something or a little different because of time zones. I've been working a lot in the Australian time zone. So this is actually a really early meeting for me. And so I thought, well, a lot of the initiative meetings are actually geared towards East Coast US time zones. There's a lot like it, it would be like 6, 7 in the morning for me on the in California. And then of course Sarabi is in India, right? So we're like, okay, well, how can we do this maybe where we can, have more than, I mean, obviously we do meetings so that you can participate asynchronously, which is great. But there is nothing better than having some synchronous, conversation in the moment and trying to work things out, right? So we decided we'd do it every 2 weeks, and then we'd alternate time zones. So Sarabi's in charge of one of them, and then I'm normally in charge of the other, but Sarabi did it yesterday because it was my anniversary. So thank you for that. And yeah, but as far as getting other people involved, at this point, it's really been, just people jumping in where they saw a need. So for example, we ran this event last week, and I've been incredibly slammed. We have a release happening tomorrow, so client release, and it's been going on for like a year. So, been high stress levels. And fortunately, a couple of people in the community, Benji and Gombre, what is Gombre's first name? Anyway, a couple of people jumped in and said they would do documentation for the event, which was on the list. And I was so thankful that they were able to jump in. So at this point, I think participation has been pretty focused. Like Gus Austin, I think his last name, he's been involved in a lot of he's very persistent, and he's been really pushing me to try to get this, like the funding stuff sorted out. And I owe him a little bit of work, which I should have done a couple weeks ago. But so, people have been chipping in areas that they feel most confident, and kind of like stretching us to think of different things. And and just, it's not, like I said, it's fairly ad hoc at this point. I mean, we have certain things we're focused on, and the meetings help focus us, which is great. But I think people chime in with the things that are most relevant to them, or what they have the most experience with, and how they can help in the time that they have.
So it sounds like we might need the next meta level. We need to go deeper. We need an initiative. So it's an initiative about
well, actually, Gobor's a little bit on kind of the initiative lead, but yeah, there's kind of like having that documentation at that level of like, you want to start an initiative, what do you do? I could probably participate in contributing to that playbook, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because we've had a couple, over the last maybe couple of months, we've had a few different initiative participants or leads kind of talking about how they did. And there's a couple different stories. One, like Project Browser, Dries kind of announced the initiative and then it started, right? But this one was a little bit more organic, where you saw a need, and after asking about it a few times, you kind of just started it yourself and gathered the community support necessary. But there's multiple valid ways to start an initiative, but might be helpful to have that documented somewhere, so people, if they're thinking about starting it, they know the different pathways.
Yeah, it's simple. Just listen to every episode of Talking Drupal. You'll figure it out.
We can get behind that.
58 episodes.
Tell your friends, tell your family. Yep, absolutely.
So obviously, just this past weekend, there was a big event, the Drupal 10 contribution events. Drupal 10 porting day, I guess is what it's actually called. So talk a little bit about putting that together. How did it get started? And then, are there boots on the ground, or was it mostly online? Give us an overview of what went on there, and maybe we'll start with Sarabi.
Yeah, so I think the talk was already going on in D10 readiness meeting. I'm not very active there because I don't understand anything. But yeah, I keep an eye there, and I saw that they are thinking of doing an event, a porting event, just like they did last year for Drupal 9. Sorry, last year. So I think that was the topic that we brought to our meeting in contribution events initiative. And we started thinking, when can this be done, and how soon is this needed to be done? And again, it was all ad hoc. We just started talking about it in the meetings. And then one meeting, we decided that we should do it very soon. and this is the weekend, let's do it. And it was just the same discussion that is happening right now, that let's do it. And this is the time that is most preferable for Indian time zone. This is the time that is better for American ones. So that's how it started, that we'll do it this weekend. That was the recent weekend. And the main thing was the documentation again, that as soon as we talked about that this is the weekend we are doing Drupal 10 porting day, everyone who reached out to me was asking about where should we find the steps or how should we participate. So I think that is one of the most critical thing that we still need to look at. And yes.
So do you think, like, now that the first event has happened, right? You just talked about kind of one lesson learned, but do you think there are other lessons that were learned from that, and like improvements to the playbook or changes to the playbook that you're thinking about making?
On my part, I guess, yes. First thing that came to my mind when the event was happening was that I should be more prepared as an organizer, because this was a different event. Though I did participate in Drupal 9 porting day as well, but again, as Gabor said, it was very ad hoc and I just helped out. But this time I was someone who was kind of from the initiative side, so that preparation was missing at my end. This is something that is a point on me. But other than this, again, as I said, when we are marketing about any event, it is important that we also list down where to find all the things related to that and how the audience should prepare about this. So that is one of the great improvement points that I have in my mind.
Kristen, what about you? Do you have any takeaways?
Yeah, probably too many for this call, but okay, so definitely what Surabhi said, getting our ducks in a row ahead of time. And, we did get a lot of stuff in place, but I didn't feel like it was totally there. And again, like I mentioned, I was overrun with client preparation. Of course, they found a bunch of bugs, right? It's funny because we picked the date for this event. And then the client said, oh, we're going to have a launch. It was a few days later. I'm like, of course you are. That's how it always goes. But I think some of the things for this event in particular, the mentors themselves weren't all on the same page. So an example was, normally if you have an issue and you work on it and you're like, yeah, I tested it, looks good, you would mark it RTBC, right? Reviewed and tested by the community, saying, yeah, it's ready to go. Now, what we were working on were bot issues. So, bot runs, it figures out what deprecations there are on this project. It creates an issue, okay. It adds patches, right? So it's a little different model, but then we were testing those and making sure that they were working. So, some of us, were marking them RDBC, all good. And then someone, I won't name names, was like, oh, well, but we need the bot to be able to add more patches. And right now the bot doesn't add patches if it's RTBC. So moving them back to needs review. And I was like, well, then how does the maintainer know that this has been tested and is ready to go? And, anyway, there was a lot of internal discussion about that. So there were things just for this particular event that the mentors were not on the same page and didn't get sorted out during the event. So we have since gotten sorted out, and we are supposed to mark them RDPC. So we're going to go back and update some of those. But so, I think making, it's hard, right? Maybe a playbook for the mentors or some, information for the mentors to be prepared for the event, also for the organizers to be prepared for the event. It's all about preparation, right? And I think that was a big thing. I guess as a more general thing, we weren't really sure what to do with this open social platform. We had used it on other events, DrupalCon, and successfully, and it worked well when we had a lot of kind of different streams happening and people could jump in and go to different breakout rooms in, this big blue button, which is like a Zoom-like thing or, something like this. And so I thought, well, okay, I guess it's useful to be able to jump on, screen share, talk through things. So we did set it up, created all the stuff, but then we didn't use it because everyone was just in chat. And
Okay.
yeah, so the jury's still out on, I don't know, on that one. But yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of things, but I think more documentation, there's a theme happening here. And just, yeah, a little more space to prepare and try to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, but.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is kind of some of the first times you're running these events with this kind of process building in mind. So that there's always, as long as you get lessons learned, that's always a positive. But I'm also curious about what are some of the successes of the event? What things went well and things that you're going to keep, Kristen?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it was exciting to see. We did have a lot of participation, not so much in my time zone for some reason. I don't know, but for pretty much all the other time zones, we had a lot of people participating. So I think that was quite successful. I think Sarabi has some stats that she can share in a minute. But I think, again, keeping, like you said, keeping in mind that we want to be able to document this process. I had that in my head as I was making issues, like, okay, we need to do, we need to create the open social, which, jury's still out, but, we need to make that. We need to make an event on the community events page. We need to do some promotion, so starting to kind of do the scaffolding, right, of all of these different steps that need to happen. My son made a logo for the initiative, and then he made a sort of a banner for this event. And because I always say, hey, make something for me. So yeah, I think that's very successful. Now we have to take that and make it a little more generic, right, and put that in the documentation. But we have a lot of those steps there.
And so,
and then Robbie, maybe the stats.
Yeah. So in total, we had close 153 issues worked upon, out of which 9 issues are closed, 18 are fixed, 7 are in RTBC, 78 in needs review, 12 are in needs work, and 29 still active.
Oh, wow.
So this number looks pretty good. And I also see there was a lot of participation from Indian community, and they were first-time contributors and also first-time mentors. So I was pretty excited to see that people are actually interested in taking part, even though it is their first time as mentors.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, how long were the events per time zone? I mean, obviously people can work as long as they want, but were you blocking off like an hour, 2 hours? I mean, what was kind of the format?
Yeah, so organization-wise, we had a spreadsheet for mentors to sign up in certain blocks. We did hour blocks, but most people usually signed up for at least a couple hour blocks as far as on the mentor side. And up to, I don't know, I think I had a 4-hour block or whatever, but yeah, from 2 to 4 hours, usually the mentors were signed up, and then contributors just popped in whenever. Actually, it was funny because I got online before the event, like a few hours before, and there were people already starting. I was like, wait a minute, we're not starting yet. I'm like, oh, it's okay. So fortunately I was around and I was available, and I was going through the documentation and, testing that and all that. But so I was able to actually jumpstart.
I think that was because of the time zone that we have mentioned. Somewhere it is in UTC, somewhere it is in our current time zones. So maybe that's why it started on 28th July instead of 29th.
Yeah, so we did it as a 24-hour, but then I was like, well, I want to keep going after that. So I made it a 30-hour event. But there is a bug on, probably make this aware. I hope it'll be fixed at some point, but on the community events page, if you look at an event and you're not in that time zone, it will show it like you're logged in. It'll show it in your own time zone. So you're like, wait, I thought, I'm so confused. So I had this, put this big note on the top saying, and it was super funny because, I put this big note, important note, time zone, and I think it was during the event, someone posted a screenshot and they circled and they're like, but the time zones aren't right. I'm like,
Yeah,
Someone's like,
that's
yeah,
still,
you need to read. the
no,
note
that's
there.
still a current issue in Drupal 9. In fact, I have most of my sites patched for that.
You have the debug.
So yeah, it will be fixed someday, like most things.
Yeah, actually,
but
they're making good progress on it right now.
that someday might be a very long time, though. Who knows?
Funny, specifically on the events page, I think we've talked about that on the show before, because I found that issue. I don't know, probably last year sometime, and I was like, "Wait, this is weird. We should talk about this," and then realized it's not an easy fix. So
it's actually really close now. I guess I made enough of a stink that yeah, it's really close.
Well,
Hopefully.
thank you for your efforts there, because that's been a long time issue.
Yeah. So let's say that I want to organize my own contribution event. I'm an organizer here in Portland, so maybe at our next meetup, we collect some issues and we decide, okay, this particular day we're going to get together and we're going to work on something. How would we get started? Like, let's say there's a particular contrib module we want to port from, Drupal 7 to Drupal 9.10, something like that.
Go from 7. Whee. Okay, so that's a good question. I mean, so this would sounds like an in-person event, right? So that's something that, although I've participated in plenty of in-person events, I haven't done much organizing myself. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the event organizers working group in a bit, but yeah, I mean, there's different ways you can do what you say and say, we're going to focus on this one particular project. You could break up into teams. There's a lot of different ways you could approach that. In some ways, in-person events are easier because you're all right there in the room and you can kind of decide as together collectively, like, oh well, actually this isn't working out, let's go and do this other thing instead, right? You can be a little bit more dynamic than perhaps when you're trying to you can't see what everyone's working on, right, with the remote event. But yeah, I don't know, I think we need some documentation on some sort of good steps for the in-person events.
Well, and I could actually change up the request, because we've had 2 in-person meetups during this calendar year, 0 during the previous calendar year. So it would almost certainly have a mostly online component there.
Actually, so this I think is a good case for the open social platform, or something like this platform, where you can just jump on. This would be probably a small group, relatively small group, where you can jump on together, perhaps screen share, and work through things. Because for the 2020 porting events, we were able to jump onto. Well, actually, I think it was for DrupalCon, but we had a one breakout room, which was on porting, and we were able to share. And this was the first time I learned about DrupalPod. Oh, I was just like, I was so happy. That is an amazing tool. So yeah, I think for smaller events, where you probably will actually know a lot of the people, because if it was about Portland event, then having everyone kind of jump into the same space, even if it's virtual, I think can be really helpful.
If you want to know more about DrupalPod, you can listen to Talking Drupal 312, where Offer Shaw talks all about that. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yes.
So I have a clarifying question here about the contribution events initiatives. So at this time, is the initiative solely focused on virtual events as opposed to in-person events? Sounds like that's the case.
It was a good place to start, just because that's pretty much all I can do. And there are a lot of people who already know how to organize local events. So, obviously contribution is a slightly different thing than like having sessions and all that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of overlap with organizing, finding time slots and all that for an in-person event versus an online is kind of a different thing. So yeah, I mean, certainly my focus at the moment is more on the online in order to make that playbook. And then I think I would need boots on the ground. I don't know, try to find an in-person event where, I could help them probably remotely, but help them try to organize it. And maybe we could start documenting that as well.
So I guess that's the next question. Is that part of the plan? Because, having events that are tied to another event, like a contribution day at a camp or a con, is very different than kind of these global sprint day type events as well. Is the plan eventually for you guys or your initiative to document those as well and lay out that plan? Or are you planning long-term to kind of focus just on contribution specific events as well?
No, the goal is to document all the things. So yeah, we do have issue pages for like hybrid, like how do you do that? That's a whole nother kettle of fish. So no, definitely we would like some playbooks for in-person versus remote, and then the hybrid thing, that's just interesting. But got to start somewhere, right? So I think that's how we fell into the global event space.
I have one more question, but I do want to make a comment that New England Drupal Camp, we're planning on doing a contrib day. So if you wanna talk to Leslie about possibly helping virtually with that, it's going to be an in-person event solely, but it could be a good test bed for you guys to kind of work on that documentation. Question about contribution events. Is it necessary or highly recommended to have like one initiative or goal that you are contributing to? Or is it possible to just have a contrib event that's like, come and contribute to whatever you want?
Surabhi?
So yeah, that's a very nice question. Actually, that was again the question that I had when we were doing the regular meetups, because I was always finding it difficult to have a theme for every month. So it was most of the times that we used to do a generic contribution sprint. But when I used to get some kind of guidance from someone, or I used to get someone's help or someone's time on that day, then we used to make it more theme-centric as compared to the generic ones. So, but we have done mostly the general contribution sprints.
When you put together one of these events, obviously there's a certain amount of person effort, sweat equity that has to go into it. What are some of the other assets, whether it's virtual or real, that are required to put into one of these events?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, if it's remote, then they need to be on Drupal Slack, because that's where we tend to organize and to communicate. Whereas you wouldn't need that, I guess, for in-person event. You wouldn't have to do it that way. I don't know some of the other things that we need.
I mean, I saw you linked to like a contrib Kanban. Like that was something that it
so
can be like a stylistic choice, but I don't know, is it pretty important?
Yes, that's interesting about the Kanban. So, I have seen that used over the years off and on. The problem with the Kanban is that it limits to 50. So once you get more than 50 issues, then you can't see the rest of them anyway. So I thought it was just a quick, nice visualization, but not really that practical. Using the issue queue itself is probably better there. But yeah, I mean, I think really a lot of it is built around what are you using for your local, there's always, like, are you doing Drupal? Can you do it in DrupalPod, or are you trying to use your local for setting stuff up? So obviously that's for code contribution, but that's always a factor that people are looking at is how can they make sure that they've got their environment set up properly. So yeah, I mean, Documentation. I don't know. Sarabi, any other ideas?
Yeah, I think with remote events, promotions is also a big factor because there's a very thin line between how much promotion is good promotion and when it becomes too much. So because you are doing everything online, you are promoting, you're talking, you're discussing on Slack and Twitter. So it becomes very difficult to understand when is the right time to talk about what thing and where.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And for promotion, I didn't actually have enough time to do as much promotion as I had hoped. It's things like, okay, if you want to have sort of a blog post on Drupal.org about this, like, I don't even know that yet. Like, who do I talk to? How do I make that happen? I know it could happen. Like, if I wrote something, I'm sure I could get it out there. I just didn't have time. But I think really the main tool is knowledge, and then documenting that knowledge, really, because there's so much that you can do. It's just too hard to kind of wrap your head around all of it.
I was saying, you could record yourself a 60-second audio commercial and send it to John. He'll slap it in the beginning of the episode.
You want to send it to Steven. You can drop a promo into Talking Drupal anytime you want. We're glad to hawk your community events.
And
all right,
at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo is the way to find out about that.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about the contribution events, and we've talked about people wanting to start their own. But if somebody's listening to this, it sounds like you were, Sarabi, earlier, like, and say, hey, yes, that's a problem that I want to help solve as well, as documenting this. If somebody wants to get involved in this initiative, what's the best way for them to do that?
So if they are not already on Drupal Slack, I think they need to join the contribution events. That's the first step, joining the Slack. Yeah.
Okay. And that's the Contribution Events Initiative channel?
Contribution Events channel, yes.
Yeah, that's an easy place. You can just jump in there and say, hey, I'm here. Yeah. I'd like to help. I don't know where to start. And then we'll guide you. We'll help you contribute.
Awesome. And then it sounds like you use the issue queue as well on the Contribution Events project?
Very heavily. Some people may, if they went in there and they'd be like, wait, you already have, I don't know, more than 50 issues or something, and wonder, like, how do you have that many issues when you've only been going for, 3 months or whatever it is? So like I said, the goal around this, I try to make an issue for anything that we do. Like, going to make a logo for the initiative, I make an issue. So a lot of it is like, I'm trying to track all of the things that we're doing, because I want other people to know, like, these are the things that you need to get done, right? It's so often that we go and we just do stuff, right? We just do a bunch of stuff. And then someone asks you later, well, what were all the steps for organizing that? Well, I don't know. I guess I did this and that, whatever, right? So I'm being overly particular about making an issue as many issues, as for concrete tasks, especially if it's something like that's code contribution, right? So that we can say, oh, we did this and this and this and this, and oh, those are all the things that you need in order to make this, happen and make that playbook.
Okay.
Oh, actually, one thing that didn't get mentioned, talking about the issues, if people have ideas of any kind, we actually have groomed you can make your own little category components, whatever they're called, right? So we have an ideas bucket. And so people will think of not just like how to make contribution events better, but they'll actually have ideas about a contribution event. So there are actually people that are like, oh, it'd be nice to have a bug smash, triage event, or it'd be nice to have a module mentors thing. And so if you just have an idea of anything that's related to contribution, events, then feel free to just go in and pop an issue in there.
Awesome. Well, we're winding down here at Talking Drupal, and wondering if either of you have anything else you'd like to share, anything that we didn't go over, anything you feel like is important.
Maybe in the show notes, you can mention the meeting times that we have, because we have two different, and it's bi-weekly. So it's pretty difficult to understand in one go.
Yeah,
but if it is mentioned somewhere, it is better.
Yeah, in the show notes, we do have a link to the Contribution Events Initiative page on Drupal.org. So I imagine that everybody can find that information there, but we can definitely link to the meeting times more specifically as well. And those meetings are, if I heard you correctly, they're on Slack. Is that true?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
In chat meeting, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. I guess as far as some takeaways, I'm just very thankful for everyone that helped last week on the first, official event that this initiative helped put together. So we had a lot of mentors, a lot of participants, and we had also, I tried to shout out to the companies who actually paid for people to participate. Obviously, some people did it on their own time as well, so that's amazing. But trying to encourage more companies to try to fund that. My time was funded by Salsa Digital, and Sarabi. I don't know if your time was funded.
Yeah, it was by Srijan. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that has been, that's obviously a huge help. And going back to the funding, getting paid contribution time is huge, and carving out that time. So just a big thanks to everyone that helped participate. I feel like it was even with the hiccups, it was quite successful, and the next one will be much smoother.
Yeah, I know quite a few of my teammates from EPAM were involved, and they had their own internal kind of contribution event around that. So glad to see that, people are getting into it and definitely contributing. That's super, super duper important.
One side note, which was interesting, because we had the event, there were a lot of maintainers that ahead of the event, they did a bunch of stuff. It was sort of prodded them to, because they're like, oh, well, I already know what I need to do. And so they just went and did it. So there was this flurry of people, which was actually kind of cool. It's sort of like it gave them a deadline of, to go in and kind of clean up their queue before the event. So they didn't have to worry about, people testing their stuff, because they already knew that they were going to commit it. So I thought that was good.
Awesome.
Great. Kristen, Sarabi, thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Do you have questions or feedback? You can reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack and the Talking Drupal channel. If you're interested in show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, and Chad's Book Corner, sign up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
As we talked about earlier, you can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing Become a Patron.
All right. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Kristen, if people wanted to reach out to you to talk more about contribution events, how would they go about doing that?
Probably Drupal Slack is the simplest thing. But I mean, certainly welcome to, you could email me. Kristen@kristen.org works. But yeah, probably Slack is the best place, because that's kind of where we do most of our chatting and organizing.
Awesome.
What's your username on Drupal Slack?
Just Kristen Pohl. Very boring.
Or very efficient. You choose.
With the space.
The space gets me every time.
I know, it's horrible, huh? Actually, well, that's on Drupal.org. On Slack, I guess it's, I don't know, probably an underscore or something. I don't remember.
Listen, just get on Drupal Slack and start typing. You'll find it.
Exactly.
Sarabi, what about you?
It's the same. I'm quickest on Drupal Slack.
There's a key takeaway here. Our last couple of shows, everybody just go and join the Drupal Slack.
Yeah.
Ryan, I want to thank you again for joining us for the last 4 weeks. It's been awesome. Where can folks find you if they want to chat?
I go by Liberator without the last vowel just about everywhere. Drupal and Twitter, Instagram, things like that. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to be a little bit more official. But I am around and available for, moderating your panels, hosting podcasts, things like that. Especially if it doesn't require my time when I would normally be spending with my family. So this has been really great, just being able to drop in and contribute here on the podcast, because my work was very flexible and let me do it for this little stint here. So also thanks to FFW for giving me the time.
Yes,
we do. Having you join us.
We do appreciate all of our corporate sponsors that kind of allow their folks to come on and talk to us about fun Drupal stuff. Nick, what about you? How can people get in touch with you?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And I'm John Picozzi. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And if you are looking for a job, you can go to epam.com/careers.
All right, now everyone, let's grab your cup of coffee or your tea, your favorite beverage, and relax with the cool sounds of the Talking Drupal podcast. Not all contributions needed to be code. Some good documentation can keep you from straying too far off the road. Kristen and Sarabi will help you whether you're sitting, standing, or walking. And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Have a good one, everyone.
Have a good week. See you guys next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Wait, that's definitely staying in.
Literally cutting that out and adding that to the end of every single show. Every single show. Just there it is, right there.
That would be the best outro we've ever had. Yeah, that's great.
I literally did not even expect you to rhyme it together like that, but man, there it was. You win.
Wow.
You win, sir.